What is happening, guys? Todd here. I thought I'd share with you in this video a bulletin board I used to dial into. This was a pirate bulletin board back in the 90s, but I want to wind this back a little bit before I get to the bulletin board and kind of get you up to where how I got to this point. It would have been mid-94, right after I graduated. It was summer 94, right after I graduated high school, between going to high school to college. I talked my parents into buying me an Amiga compatible. Up until that point, I'd never had anything that was able to dial it on the bulletin boards or get on the internet. It was a 486 SX33, had a built-in 2400 baud modem, which was, it was so slow, but it had a 2400 baud modem, I want to say 105 meg hard drive. I don't remember exactly. It was somewhere around 100-ish, 160, 105, I don't know, something like that. It was small, 110 meg, maybe that's what it was. 4 megabytes of RAM, color monitor, stuff like that. Had a little multimedia kit with the CD-ROM and the crappy little speakers and the 8-bit Sound Blaster compatible sound card. It wasn't even a regular Sound Blaster. It was one of those Aztec, some sort of crappy 8-bit sound card. But that's what I had. And once I went to college, I discovered bulletin boards. Up until that point, I'd never had a computer that was able to dial out, so it was just something I'd never really done. So when I went to college, there used to be this flyer that would be handed out. I can't remember who distributed it. I don't think it was done by the university. It might have been done by maybe one of the computer clubs or something like that. But anyways, it was a flyer that had all the local bulletin boards listed in it. And at the time, this would have been summer '94, and there was a ton of bulletin boards because I was going to school in Columbus, Ohio. There was I don't know if I'd want to say hundreds of bulletin boards, but I would probably say there was a solid 100, give or take. There was a variety of bulletin boards. And for you guys, I know there's a lot of guys that I follow on Twitter that are big into dialing into bulletin boards. The ones that are set up now, the ones that you can go in through Telnet. But back in the 90s, just to give you a little refresher for the guys that don't know about this, the way bulletin boards were set up, I would classify them in 3 or 4 different distinct categories. You had just your regular shareware bulletin boards. By this point, by the mid-90s, a lot of these guys were running Wildcat BBS on PCs, on DOS PCs. So that was extremely prevalent bulletin board system. Had all your messages and FIDO, and people would exchange and talk back and forth, and there was lots and lots of shareware. That was the common bulletin board. There was tons and tons of these kind of bulletin boards. They all had their own kind of angles and their own kind of gimmick to them, but the reality is they were all very similar in that respect. The second bulletin board I would classify as probably your adult bulletin board. They were ones that exchange, adult pictures. They did dating and, precursor to like your Match.com and all your different, online dating sites, chemistry and all that crap. You had bulletin boards that were doing something very similar. They were kind of getting adults connected with other adults. So I would classify that as a second category. Then you had, I would say, your miscellaneous ones. This would be my third category. These were just leftovers. These might be, guys running Amiga bulletin boards or Apple II bulletin boards. There was even a few guys running Macintosh bulletin boards. Any of those kind of things. I would classify that by the mid-90s as kind of your miscellaneous category. And then number 4. Number 4, this will be your pirate bulletin boards. This is where things start getting kind of interesting. Most of the time, most of these pirate bulletin boards their phone numbers weren't published. You didn't just go out and get a directory of bulletin boards from your local computer club and, oh, hey, pirate boards, that didn't happen. So usually you had to discover these on your own. Usually it was word of mouth. Maybe you downloaded a piece of cracked software from somewhere that inside the software had a README that pointed back to the bulletin board, or something like that. And the bulletin board that I discovered was Tower of Sorcery. It was ran by the Sysop, the system operator. His name was Archmagi or Archmagi, something like that. And it was an Amiga-based bulletin board. And most of the pirate bulletin boards back in the day, whenever you dialed into them, you were either presented with being able to sign up as a new user like any other bulletin board. And usually if you signed up as a new user, they'd kind of vet you. You'd put in your information, your phone number, your interest, whatever details they wanted. And sometimes they'd call you to vet you. Sometimes it was some other kind of process they used to vet you because they were obviously very concerned about getting busted by the cops and stuff. However, there were some bulletin boards that you had to be referred. You couldn't just call in and set up a new account. You had to be referred. When you called in to set up a new account, you had to be referred by somebody else, or they had to be somebody they knew, or something like that. It wasn't just a free-for-all where anybody could sign up anytime. So I called Tower Sorcery, and I wish I could remember how exactly I came upon the phone number. I probably downloaded something from somewhere that had the bulletin board information in it. There was a couple other pirate bulletin boards, big pirate bulletin boards in Columbus, Ohio. Xeon's Hideout, that was another one. That was also an Amiga. Ran one. But the one I remember calling the most was Tower Sorcery. So the first time I signed in, I was able to create an account. And most of those pirate bulletin boards were ratio based. Like for example, if you uploaded 1 megabyte, it allowed you to download 5 megabytes, or whatever the ratio was. There was usually a ratio system, so you couldn't just call in, just leech this shit out of stuff. You couldn't just call in, just download everything. There had to be a ratio in place. So basically, for new users, you might get allocated like kind of a carrot to lure you in. You might get a couple megabytes, or whatever the case was, to incentivize you. Otherwise, you had to upload stuff to download, so that's how it worked. So I remember calling into this bulletin board a few times and getting a few things, maybe uploading a few things I found elsewhere. Then Sysop private messaged me saying, hey, these aren't really what we're looking for. We're not looking for shareware Castle Castle Wolfenstein. This is not the kind of bulletin board we are, because I imagine for a lot of guys, when they call those bulletin boards, if they're not familiar with that scene, they just have, I've got this here, I'll upload this up. And no, that's not what they're wanting. They're wanting the good stuff. They're wanting 0-day wares. They're wanting stuff that's brand new, fresh releases, not something that's been around for a year or two, or some of the shareware version. You definitely don't want to upload that. They definitely don't want that. But to get back to the story of this bulletin board, I had a buddy of mine that lived back in West Virginia, where I grew up at, that came up and stayed with me for a while. This would have been, at this point, this was probably, because I started calling that bulletin board probably late 94, very, very early 95, somewhere in that area. So anyways, my buddy came up and stayed with us for a while, and he wanted to get in on this pirate bulletin board stuff. And he was like, what do we need to do to get unlimited access to this? And I was like, hell, I don't know. Let's message this up and find out what would take to get greater access. Because I don't have the hookups. I'm not a courier. I don't have access to all these European pirate bulletin boards to call into and get all this new wares. So I wanted in his stuff, but I didn't have the ability to give him what he needed. So we reached out to the Sysop and was like, hey, what can we do to get unlimited access to your bulletin board? And he gave us a dollar amount. I don't remember what the dollar amount was, 500,000. I don't remember what it was, but at the time I was a college student. There's no way in the world I had, a couple $100 would have been difficult, much less coming up with $1,000 to buy an unlimited pass, so to speak, for this bulletin board, basically leech access. So we're like, hey, can we trade something? And he's like, well, what do you have? And keep in mind, at this point, this would have been very early 95, or spring, I don't know, something like that. Maybe April, somewhere there, late March, early April, something like that. And my buddy Steve, the one that came up to stay with me, he also had a Japanese PlayStation, which at the time had not been released in America. He still had the original, the Japanese PlayStation, which was released in Japan in late 94. So at this point, it was only maybe 5 or 6 months old. He's like, hey, offer him the PlayStation. I was like, are you fucking shitting me? If at the time, if you wanted to import a PlayStation, you had to go through some of the specialized importers and pay all these outrageous import taxes. And then the games themselves. So he probably had, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have $800 or so, maybe more money that involved in the PlayStation and a handful of games. There was like Toshinden and Ridge Racer, Tekken, one or two other ones. I don't remember what the other ones were. But he's like, hey, offer this to him. I'm like, oh man, are you sure? He's like, yeah, cool. Let's just go ahead and do this. Okay, cool. So we I messaged Sysop back and said, hey, we take a Japanese PlayStation's trade. And this guy was like, yep, that'll work. There was like not even a debate. No, let me think it over. Nope. Yeah, that'll work. Bring it on over. So he gave us the address. And this is, keep in mind, this is a pretty big pirate BBS operation. This is a guy that has, at the time, he probably had 8 or 9 nodes, something like that. So it wasn't a small time operation. He was a pretty big guy running, a lot of phone lines, a lot of stuff going in and out of his BBS. So this was, big deal. So he gave us his address. We drove across town because I was in Columbus. He was in Columbus. So we drove across town and met up. And we went to his house, walked in, and this guy was very much a computer geek. His computer wasn't like down the basement. No. It was sitting right on the dining room table in his kitchen. and it was a big old setup too. However, that wasn't the most interesting thing that I saw when I walked in. The thing that hit me in the face basically as soon as I walked in was this enormous wall of software. Imagine a wall probably, I want to say it was his living room wall. Basically, as soon as you walked in the front door, there was this wall, just part of the living room that then opened over here to the side into the kitchen. But it was a living room wall, probably 12, 15 feet long, something like that. And he had lined across this wall diskette boxes, like your regular clamshell style, that holds like 100 floppy disks, those kind of boxes, your regular software, floppy disk storage cases. He had, I have no idea how many there was. There was probably a few hundred of those cases, each with, 50 to 100 disks, and just lined across the wall, just lined back and forth, up. And they were basically, I would say, against the wall, they were probably 3 to 4 foot off the ground, stacked that high, and some of them were maybe 2 deep all the way down this wall. So there was a staggering amount of software is what I'm getting at. I walked in, I was like, damn. And I asked him, software, like, you clean some out? And he's like, oh yeah, whenever a buddy of mine decides to move over to the PC, I just buy out his entire collection. So he's got just boatloads of software. That was the first thing that just struck me, was the amount of diskettes. I mean, he was like just massive amounts of software on floppy. His actual BBS system, though, was an Amiga 2000. I don't remember all the exact specs. I want to say it was an 030 or 040 machine, something like that. Amiga 2000, couple gigs of internal storage. Had an external worm drive. That was one of the cool things. Whenever you called into his bulletin board, if you wanted to download something that wasn't currently available on the board, you could request an archive restore. And basically, he had this external backup tape worm drive system that would then go and retrieve the data and temporarily restore it back, and then you'd have so many day or hours or whatever to call into the bulletin board and download it. So he had that set up. It was basically spread across his dining room table, and he had a fucking stack of modems. It was crazy. I'd never seen anything like that before. At my house, I'd had just computer with a single modem, single phone line. So to walk into a guy's house that has just this much stuff hooked up, it was just staggering. The guy was super nice, though. I wish I could remember his name or his occupation. I want to say he worked for either CompUSA, which that wouldn't surprise me, or maybe it was a carpet store, something with a C. I want to say CompUSA or carpet store, which I know those are two very different things. But yeah, that's what seems to stick to my mind. I think it was a CompUSA. But anyways, he would buy out buddies' collections and he would just add to his and stuff like that. But he ran that pirate bulletin board for a few years, and we got full access with the trade for the PlayStation. He was happy to do it. We talked to him for a while, and then we took off, went back home, dialed into the bulletin board, and hey, lo and behold, got leech access complete. No need to upload, just download to your heart's content. He was happy with the deal, and we were too. So my buddy Steve, he stayed with me for a few weeks, and he just downloaded software. I'd go to bed at night, he'd be up on the computer downloading stuff. I'd go to work in the morning, he'd still be downloading stuff. I come back from work, he'd still be downloading stuff from this bulletin board. He just kept the phone line lit up, just constantly downloading stuff. I have no idea whatever happened to that bulletin board, because I probably continued dialing into that board for another year or maybe 2 at most, something like that. And then I think it ended up getting busted by the cops. There was a whole series of bulletin boards back in the mid-late 90s. This was, right as they were going into internet distribution for a lot of pirate software, but bulletin boards were still very prevalent for being the avenue of release for this stuff. So I think him and Xeon's Hideout, some of the other pirate bulletin boards got shut down. I think they got busted. But I'll never forget that, just walking into his house and just seeing this enormous wall of software, and then this huge Amiga set up on his dining room table for his bulletin board system with just tons of hardware hooked to it, cables and modems and backup drives. It was crazy. But I thought I would share that with you. It was just, I started thinking about this the other day, and I thought I'd share it with you guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button down below, and leave a comment. I'd be interested in your stories about bulletin boards and pirate ones. Did you ever meet any of the Sysops of pirate BBSs? Did you call into them, or did you think that was taboo? I'd like to know. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.